Hello, HSB. So I think you will agree with me on this, but fear is a pretty common emotion that's been experienced by people throughout all time. In fact, many of the great biblical characters were stricken with fear. And in all honesty, I myself am not exempt from this. I certainly do have some fears. But I don't always think that fear is necessarily a bad thing, or that being afraid is necessarily wrong. I'm often confronted with a question, and it's a question that I want to invite you to hopefully consider every day. It's not so much, do I have fears, but what am I going to do with my fears? Now, you may remember the biblical story of Moses when he unexpectedly encounters Yahweh in the burning bush, and it was pretty unexpected. If you remember, it says that he hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. But I also want you to notice that despite his fears and despite his resistance that he puts up to the task, Moses remains engaged with God. He stays put. And it's in the midst of his fears that Yahweh assures him with this phrase, I am who I am. Or a translation that I find to be a little more helpful, I will be who I will be. Now, if you're like me, that makes no sense. In fact, it lacks concreteness, it lacks definitiveness, it lacks my ability to get my mind around it and make sense of it. But I think Yahweh is intentional about this. Because for all that it lacks in concreteness and definitiveness, it actually suggests an open-ended world, and open-ended possibilities. And I think the ambiguity in it parallels the ambiguity that not only Israel and Moses are experiencing, but also the ambiguity that you and I are currently experiencing. And if you know the biblical story, I think you'll see this revelation, this name as it were, I will be who I will be, not only playing itself out, but shaping Israel's history and even our own current time. So, for example, when God's people cry out to God for help in time of trouble, what might Yahweh say to that? I will be the one to hear you, and I will come down, and I will rescue you. Or do God's people ever find themselves needing to cross an impassable sea? Yahweh says, I will be the one to make a way where there is no way. Or do you ever find yourself needing sustenance and nourishment and rest in a barren desert? I will be the one to provide for you, to nourish you, and to sustain you. Or do you find yourself in a land that you do not know, surrounded by an enemy that you cannot see? I will be for you a visible presence by day and a visible light guiding you at night. In effect, God is saying, I will be whatever the situation requires. I will faithfully be God to you at every moment. I will not run out of resources. I will not be overwhelmed. And my attention and care for you will not be distracted. I will be everything you need. And even when I have been everything you need, you will not have exhausted all that I faithfully can and will be. I will be who I will be. I want to encourage you, in the midst of your fears, to stay engaged with God, the God who will be who He will be. Grace and shalom. Talk to you later.